includes many of our major eating disorder organisations. He was recently announced as Social Worker of the Year by the Australian Association of Social Workers, and AJ is also a lived experience ambassador at the Butterfly Foundation. AJ.
My name is AJ Williams. My background is Rotary and Watchabort. So I'm an Aboriginal man from New Ball, Horsham, and Wellington, and New South Wales. I have lived experience with an eating disorder, struggling mainly in my teens through years 8, 9, 10, and 11 at school. To start my story, I want to take words of a wise woman. Well, actually, it's from the Golden Girls, actually, but, where they start with, picture this. So I'm going to say that, picture this, 1985, February 1985. I was 14 years of age, living in northern New South Wales. I was a kid who had experienced many traumas, abuse, bullying, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I was also part of the stolen generation. I was struggling with depression, anxiety, body image issues, and working through my own Indigenous identity and culture. My life at that time was way out of control. I was not coping with the external world around me, let alone my internal world. And I didn't really understand the thoughts, feelings, and behaviours that I was experiencing. I was initially able to hide the signs and behaviours of my eating disorder from others. I'm not going to share all the things I did to help manipulate myself and others to think that I was okay. Yet the rituals, behaviours, exercise regimes kept me at body maintenance and in reality out of the minds of everybody else and the people around me. I definitely was having problems and health issues though. I was passing out all the time, I was getting regular flus and colds, I was having body aches and pains, and I actually saw doctors quite regularly. I think I had every blood test possible, I had MRIs, I had scans, with people trying to work out what was wrong. But by year 10, the behaviours that I was undertaking actually took over my whole life. Whereas they weren't just out of control, I was out of control. So one day, sitting in the science lab in year 10, sitting on one of those 3-legged stools, I kind of looked down on the floor and the room started spinning and I passed out. I actually hadn't eaten in so long and I was dehydrated and really exhausted. An ambulance was called to the school and my homeroom teacher, which actually was my year 7 homeroom teacher that I actually had again in year 10, she came and rode in the ambulance with us. And I kind of recall her saying something to the paramedics going, I've seen AJ struggling with food and I don't think he's been eating. And I think he might have actually had an eating disorder. And I don't know what happened between the paramedics and the nursing staff when I got there, but then I was dramatically, the way that I was treated dramatically changed. I wasn't poked and prodded with needles. I wasn't actually sent down for scans. People actually sat down and talked to me and they were asking me questions about how I dealt with stress, how I wasn't coping, how I was apparently supposed to be coping, how I managed things and what things I enjoyed doing, and trying to see how I actually saw myself and other people around me. I was actually hospitalised on and off for a few months. I was told that I actually had bulimia. I was told by doctors, nurses and social workers and psychologists that, well, it's actually quite unusual. We don't actually work with a lot of males. We don't actually know, we're not exactly sure. You don't actually meet the stereotypes. Statistically, you shouldn't be having an eating disorder. Well, I already felt odd. I already felt out of place and I already felt like I wasn't belonging, let alone being told by the staff that were trying to treat me that I didn't belong and I was out of place. In reality, the professionals never really knew how to work with me. I didn't match any of their case studies. Sure, they could explain to me about bulimia, they could explain to me exactly what was actually happening to me, but I often felt blame and often felt that I was at fault. And if I could just eat, then there wouldn't be a problem. I was given lots of things to read as well, really stuff that I really could not connect to. But I did learn that my periods would cease My breast development may be delayed, and I might have issues with conceiving. All really helpful tips for a young male. So the literature was not written about me, and it was definitely not for me. On a cultural level, I really didn't actually have any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander men in my life. Didn't see any of the staff that were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander at the time. And I was also told by professionals that on a cultural level, look, I've never worked with an Aborigine before, or eating disorders don't happen to Aboriginal people, or I'm not exactly sure what to do with you because you're Aboriginal and do I need to do anything different? So picture this, 2022, and I'm not sure what's really changed. To me, the system that was there was no help, like, to me, because I didn't fit the stereotypical white, female, young person. And in some ways, 30 years later, this is still a major problem. We do know that eating disorders affect everyone. They don't discriminate between race, age, gender or culture. I'm a nurse, I'm a youth worker, and I'm a mental social worker. I work with young Aboriginal men myself who often have disordered eating issues. And still, even though I can share my experiences with them, there still remains little research around Indigenous people with eating disorders and very few culturally appropriate resources that I can actually use for Aboriginal young men. Or women. To connect to. Turn the page, AJ, before we stop. And we need to start making these changes. We need more research about young Aboriginal males. We need more research on Aboriginal people in general. But we also need doctors, nurses, social workers, OTs, physios, psychiatrists, psychologists to become more culturally competent in understanding within their own practice and within research, not just about transgenerational trauma and colonisation and how that impacts on people today, but actually really understanding Aboriginal history and understanding that those events are not 200 years ago, but events that occurred in the lives of the Aboriginal people that you actually are working with today. The impact and the impact is often as a result of events that are still quite current. And once people can identify where this trauma is actually coming from, they're more likely to be in touch they're more likely to be in touch, they will become more in touch with their Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander clients and working with Aboriginal adolescents. But it's really up to all of us, everyone in this room, researchers, health clinicians, health professionals, to understand effective evidence-based ways to work with those living with, struggling with, or experiencing an eating disorder. I myself, on a personal level, am involved with the major eating disorder organisations like ANZ, the Australian New Zealand Academy of Eating Disorders, the National Eating Disorder Collaboration and the Butterfly Foundation, where I do cultural consultancy, research and advocacy. I began doing all this just to make sure that we actually start having dialogues with people, that people with lived experience and people from different cultures can actually explain that, well, actually tell stories that don't match the research criteria that everyone's actually reading about. But it's also about making sure that the workers of the future are culturally competent, so that all patients and research participants feel culturally safe, supported throughout clinical care or throughout the research process. I just want to add right at the end, look, it's been an honour and privilege to work with the above organisations that I've been working with them for about 2.5 years now, and it's really important that they are starting to listen. And I just want to also thank the women on the group, the panel here, that's been quite supportive in the projects that we've been doing at the moment. This is the beginning, it's not the end of the discussion. We're trying to make this is the beginning of the discussion. In my language we say, Yugunda Windawanda, which means thank you for listening and stay cool.